Hello there and welcome to the Abundant Self podcast, a podcast where we talk about everything there is to learn and to know about what it truly means to have life and life in abundance. My name is Sharon Chabai and thank you so much for tuning in. Hello once again and welcome to the Abundant Self podcast. If this is your very first time here, Karibu Sana. My good name is Sharon Chabai and welcome to yet another episode. This is episode 18 of the podcast and today we are going to be talking about a very interesting and I'm realizing I'm always saying this all the time, that today we're going to be talking about another interesting topic. But yes, today we are going to be talking about yet another interesting and very hopefully authentic conversation, and that is on why hiding our true selves is often safer than, letting the world see who we truly are. So yeah, once again, welcome to the podcast. Happy new month. It is the month of June. Last month was a bit hectic for us here on the podcast. We had so much going on, and I think I even hinted it in our previous bonus episode on handling transitions, that we would be taking a break. So it has been a good, week. We just took a week off and it has been refreshing. It has been good, but of course the work has to keep on going. Of course, the podcast rather exists to ensure that we are inspiring each other to live the absolute best version of ourselves, and most importantly, to embrace a life of abundance. And because this is this is a calling, I like to think, that is actually way beyond me. I always strive and purpose to show up for you, because at the end of the day, this is a community that we are building of people who are truly living abundant lives, truly living meaningful and full lives. So yes, in our previous episode, we had been talking about quarter life crisis. We had been talking about handling transitions, and this was triggered by the fact that I was turning 25, and of course there was a lot of fear, a lot of, how do I call them? A lot of fears, a lot of expectations, a lot of pressure that, of course, I was placing on myself, that society was even placing on me, or those that I was allowing society to place on me. And that was a very interesting conversation. I had very good feedback from each of those episodes. So like I always like to say, if you haven't listened to those two episodes yet, that is episode 17 on what is quarter life crisis. Is it fact or is it fiction? And if you also haven't listened to our bonus episode on handling transitions, then be sure to press pause, go back and listen to them, or you can as well listen to this episode up until the very end. And then once you're done, you can go and listen to them. And as I always like to say, be sure to let me know what you think, and be sure to even chip in. What more would you like to hear from us here on the episodes, on the podcast rather? And actually today's episode is something that one of our listeners proposed we talk about, and this is after I sent out a feedback form just a few weeks ago asking people, what they think about the podcast, and even encouraging you guys to let me know what you want us to talk about. And number one on the list was to talk about some of the masks, or some of the several masks that we put on as human beings to survive. And I felt that was a really, really interesting conversation, especially because it will help us to pick up from the conversation on authenticity that we had way earlier in the podcast. That is, I think on episode 7 or episode 6, thereabout, where we were talking about authenticity and what does it truly mean to lead an authentic life. And again, we also did another bonus episode on how to walk away from inauthenticity, or how do we step away from living inauthentic lives. But this time around, I remember when I saw that particular topic being requested, of course, the first thing that came to mind was we have talked about living authentic lives. We have talked about inauthenticity, and what it would mean for us human beings to actually embrace our true selves. But then I remember when I was reading that comment from actually one of our biggest listeners here on the podcast, I remember thinking about what if we choose to hide our true selves because it is safer than actually, presenting our true selves to the world, right? What if we have gotten so used to being on survival mode that, it has become safer, it works for us, that we really do not know any other way to live life. And that has really caused me to think a lot, because I don't know, for me as an individual, I would say without a shadow of doubt, and this is to be very honest, because that is what I strive to do here on the podcast. I would say that living behind a mask is actually really easy. It actually is easier than, showing the world who you truly are. Because, this is something that has been said over and over again about how, we are not supposed to let the world inform, how we choose to live our lives. We should not let, whether it's the media, our friends, the kind of things that we do, consume, whatever it is you might want to call it, we should not let all those things, define our identity, define who we are. But instead, we should choose to embrace our true selves, and that is the person that, God created us to be. And I remember even in episode 7, when we were talking about what does it truly mean to live an authentic life, I remember saying that the true definition of authenticity is actually living the life that God has called you to live. There is absolutely no other definition, because the dictionary would say this, society would say this, your favorite influencer would tell you that this is what authenticity means. But when you actually take a step back and when you realize and, come to the understanding and the realization that you're not here on your own accord, that you just did not just exist out of nowhere, and that, a higher being, and that is God, created us for a certain purpose, for a certain season of time, then you get to realize that the only definition of authenticity is actually being what God created you to be. And I like using this example so many times about a car. The definition of a car, what a car is determined by, what the manufacturer decided it to be. You cannot decide to look at a car and say, that is not a car, that is this, and that. No, because that definition has already been, created, or has already been defined, has already been put there by the manufacturer, by the person who created it, so to speak. I hope I'm making sense. So as an individual, authenticity is defined as, being the person that God created you to be. But unfortunately, as human beings, we have been, I don't know if I want to call it forced or conditioned, but we have been, we can say we have been forced and even conditioned to actually live on survival mode, where it's not really about who we are, our true selves, our true identities, but it's about surviving. It's about feeling, like we are accepted by society, we feel loved. And that is something that happens with all of us. We are always constantly looking for love. We are always constantly looking to feel accepted, looking to fit in, looking to, be part of something. Each and every one of us. And I know I've said this before, that none of us is an island. We have been created to exist with each other, to live with each other. And so in order for that to happen, sometimes, we feel that it is safer and it is even better for us to, behave a certain way, to play a certain role, to just be a certain kind of person that is not ourselves, in order for us to find that love, in order for us to find that acceptance that we are looking for as human beings, And I remember actually there was a time that it really struck me when I don't know what was happening at my time. I don't know what was happening in my life at that particular moment in time. But I remember just asking myself, why? Why are you looking for love so badly? Why is it that you want to be loved so badly? Or rather, why am I looking for love? I remember asking myself, why am I looking for love in all the wrong places? And I mean, it's an innate feeling, it's an innate desire in all of us to want to be accepted, right? It's an innate desire in all of us to be loved, to feel wanted, to feel like you are part of something, to feel like you have been included, you know? Most of the time we even find ourselves doing things not because we even want to do it, to do them, but because we just want, you know, to feel part of a group, to feel part of something, whatever it is you might want to call it. And this is one of the reasons as to why we put on masks. This is one of the reasons why it's even hard for us to, you know, present ourselves, present our true selves to other people. Now, I was having a conversation with one of my friends today, and it wasn't necessarily about this, but they were sharing with me, you know, how more often they find themselves in situations where they are the ones who are taking care of other people, whether it's their family members, it's their friends, the people around them. They often find themselves in a space where they are the ones taking care of other people. And I remember I asked them, so who is taking care of you? Are you taking care of yourself? And, you know, the conversation went on, and then we got to a point where my friend was telling me that most times, you know, he finds himself in a situation where, you know, for example, he may be going through something, he may be going through a lot, whether it's mentally, emotionally, whatever it is, he could be going through so much, but he can't share it with anyone because, number one, of course, people are looking to him for that strength. People are looking to him, you know, to be their support system. And of course, at that particular point in time, you do not want, again, to burden these same people with your problems. And then there's also the fact that sometimes you find that you have so much going on, or you feel like you have so much going on. Now, for them, and this is something that I could share with them when they're saying that sometimes you have so much going on, and then when you want, or rather the moment you want to share it, or the moment you actually share it with someone, they're like, my goodness, that is what you're actually complaining about. People are going through so much worse. You should be grateful. You should be this, and that. I mean, that is nothing. And how many times have we gotten ourselves or have we found ourselves in that situation where we actually chose to take off our masks? We actually chose to show the world who we truly are, even those ugly sides, you know, those things that we want to define as ugly, quote unquote. How many times have we done that and have we felt rejected, you know? And because as human beings, of course, as an individual personally, the minute I get rejected the first time, I'm not going to wait to be rejected the second time. Of course, I'm going to learn and say, okay, so no one likes it when I talk about my problems. What I'm going to do from now on is, you know what, pretend that everything is okay. Pretend that, you know, I have everything figured out. I have everything figured out, you know, when people are actually suffering, people are actually bottling up their own issues, their own problems. And being that last month was Mental Health Awareness Month, I mean, it just stems back to the fact that, you know, and I really loved it when my friend was talking about how even though that has happened to him most of the time, when he still meets up with his people, he always just goes ahead and asks them, how is your heart? You know, because most of the time, I mean, think about it. We get so used to, for example, when you're texting your friend or when you just meet up with your friend and you're like, how are you? You know, you're so used to, and you actually expect the other person to say, yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing well. Everything is fine. But the minute someone tells you, no, I'm not doing fine, you know, things haven't been going so well. Sometimes you find yourself thinking, wow, I did not expect this person to say this. I don't even know what I'm supposed to say now moving forward. How am I supposed to comfort this person? I mean, you were supposed to say you're fine, right? And that is the unfortunate part of life, is that we have gotten so used to wearing our masks. We have gotten so used to living in survival mode that, you know, the minute someone even slightly suggests that we take off our mask, we're like, are you crazy? Do you really want me to show you who I truly am? Do you really want me to take off this mask because you wouldn't like it? But then I always like to ask the question, who said I wouldn't like it if you took off your mask? Or who told you, who told me that if I took off my mask, that I would be excommunicated, for example, from society, or that people would not like me, people would find me unpopular? So what if they actually find us unpopular? So what if we choose to embrace who God actually created us to be? It is scary. It is scary to own up to the things that we actually believe in. It is scary to actually walk in a certain path that no one else is walking. It is scary to live a life that is different from those of others. And when I say this, of course, I'm saying it in the context of doing what is right, in the context of living a life that, of course, gives glory to God, living a life that truly emulates, the kind of person that God created you to be. But truly, even as I say this, I know for a fact that wearing a mask, putting on a mask, pretending to be something you are not, is actually so much easier, and it's so much safer than, showing the world who you truly are. And I really like Tori Kelly's song when she says that it's easier to be an actress. It's easier to just put up an act. It's easier to put up facade. It's easier to pretend to be something you're not, because then you get to protect yourself from a lot of heartbreak. You get to protect yourself, like I said, from a lot of rejection. You get to protect yourself from a lot of, hurtful moments, a lot of supposedly situations that you definitely maybe do not want to put yourself in. But what then does that mean for us? What then does that mean for us? And I remember thinking about when have I, as an individual, when have I not had a mask on? I was doing an audit of my life. I just sat down and I asked myself, when have you not had a mask on? When have I actually been with a person, been with myself, been even with God, been with whoever it is in a situation and not had a mask on? And the truth of the matter is, I can actually count them. I can actually count the moments when I have been vulnerable enough to not have to hide myself. When I have been honest enough to say that, this is who I am. Love me or love me. This is who I am. And of course, it's not from a place of pride. It's not from a place of arrogance where you do not want to change. Because let's face it, sometimes you find sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we are saying, this is who I am. Not because we're actually owning up to our true selves, but because we have decided not to grow. We have decided not to change. We have decided to remain in the same old stagnant state. And we expect everyone else to accommodate that, which is, of course, is not right. It's not right at all. But like I always like to say, I do not have all the answers, and it's not my place to start telling you what is right or how to lead your life. But it's just about having that provoking conversation. I sat down and I really looked at my life and I asked myself, when have I not had a mask on? When have I not been on survival mode? Clearly, I walk into a room and all I can think about is, what do I need to do to survive here? It's not even about, how can I be myself in this space? It's usually mostly about, what do I need to do to survive here? Because we are always on survival mode. I don't know if it is a default setting that we have as human beings, but we're always looking to survive. We always want to survive in absolutely every situation. That is why we find ourselves even taking on careers that we do not love. We find ourselves even entertaining people or entertaining relationships or situations that we shouldn't. We know for a fact we shouldn't, but we go ahead to do it because we just want to survive. We just want to be loved. We just want to feel accepted. We want to feel a part of something that we choose, we decide to, instead of, being loved, being accepted as who we truly are, as our true selves, we choose to conform to whatever it is the world decides to put upon our shoulders. We choose to conform to whatever it is we think we need to do so that people can accept us. And isn't it sad? Isn't it really sad that that is where we are at as human beings? The Bible is always constantly reminding us, do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. But do we really understand what that means? Do we really understand what it means for us to actually take off our masks? Why do we always feel like we have to be in survival mode? And I mean, as human beings, like I said earlier, is that we learn from our mistakes, or we learn from our experiences. You find yourself in a situation where you actually do not have a mask on, you are your authentic self, but then the world doesn't accept you for who you are. But instead of course, just keeping on being who God created you to be, you decide, okay, so the world doesn't like this. Let me then just have this mask on, and this will help me survive in this situation. It's so interesting. I was also having the same conversation with another friend of mine who was talking about how, having, of course, like I said, having several masks on, being trying to have, actually you can have several masks on, you don't even have to have one. You can decide that in this situation, this is the kind of Chebaba I'm going to be. In this other situation, this is the kind of person I'm going to be. And they were telling me how, yes, they were agreeing to the fact that it is safe. But then they also went ahead to say that for them, there are people who actually do not deserve to experience their true authentic selves. And there are people whom it's okay for them to show them, okay, that this is the real Chebaba. But there are people who they meet them and they're like, no, I'm not going to show this person who I truly am. And that made me think a lot. That made me think a lot, that it is possible for me to walk into a room and immediately I know, or even after just a few interactions, I know that, okay, I am not going to be myself with this person. I am not going to be myself with this person. And I actually thought about it, for example, in a workspace setting, right? With your boss, with your manager, whoever it is, that sometimes how we find ourselves acting a certain way, because, if I actually told this person who I truly am, then of course, I'm not going to be in this position where we find ourselves sucking up to people. And sometimes it could be people who are in a better position or in a higher position than us. It doesn't even have to be in the workspace setting. It could be in actually pretty much any other setting in life, where you find yourself behaving a certain way with certain people because, you want to find favor in their eyes. You want to be seen in a certain light. And of course, you do not really want to present your true selves to them, because if they knew who you were, then, they wouldn't accept you, right? And so to tie it back to the conversation where we were saying that no man is an island, but we were saying that, we have been put on this earth to literally be of service to other people. I mean, isn't it sad? I mean, why would we want to not be ourselves? Why would we want to choose the kind of people that, we get to show our true selves to? I mean, that is a question I have asked myself a lot ever since having that conversation with that good friend of mine. And I'm thinking, how many times have I done that myself, right? Because like I said, when I sat down and I thought about the times or the moments when I have actually not had any mask on, sometimes it has been with certain people. And of course, sometimes with other people, I have definitely not even had one mask. I have had several layers of masks on because I do not want this person to actually get to know who Chabai really is. And that is the truth of the matter. Because it is safe to be in that space where you are guarding yourself from whatever you think maybe the world is going to do with you when they finally realize who you are. It is safe when you think that, when no one knows the true me, when no one knows my vulnerabilities, when no one knows the kind of, things that maybe get to me, for example, they wouldn't hurt me. So all the time, all we want to do is just seek out for love and attention, for acceptance, for feeling a part of something from all the wrong places. And like I said, I asked myself this question one time: why am I looking? Why am I so desperately looking for love when in fact it has already been given to me? Why am I so desperately looking for acceptance when I know someone who has accepted me for who I am, who does not see me as the world sees me, but he sees me for who he created me to be? Why do I need to shield myself that much when I can in fact find rest in knowing that I am living for the audience of one? I mean, it doesn't matter what the world thinks about me. All that matters is about what God thinks about me. And that is something, of course, that is easier said than done. It is easier said than done. But remember, when we talk about living a life of abundance, when we talk about living a meaningful life, we are talking about living a life that God has called us to live. God has not called us to live on survival mode. But that has been the default setting of life. That has been our default setting, where we're literally always looking for the next thing. You go to school and immediately now you have to find a job because, how are you going to survive in a society if you do not have a job, if you do not have an income, right? Then when you get a job or when you have something stable, now you're thinking about a family because, again, you need to ensure that your lineage passes on, right? And we're always constantly looking for people who are going to help our offspring survive, whatever it is you might want to call it. So it's not even about looking after or looking, how do I put this? It's not even about pursuing authentic relationships. It's about, if I'm with this person, then I know, for example, my children will not go hungry, right? If I'm with this person, then I know I am going to live a good life. I will never lack, right? But is that really what life is all about? Is life really all about survival? Is life really all about being safe? Or is it about having life, living life and living it to the fullest? Why hiding our true selves is often safer is because all we want to do as human beings is to survive. All we want to do as human beings, or all we desire as human beings, is to feel loved, is to feel accepted, is to feel a part of something greater, a part of something. And more often than not, most if not all of us have actually found ourselves compromising the things that we believe in, compromising who we truly are, just to get that love, just to get that acceptance, just to get that, feeling of fitting in, feeling of, yes, people like me. And I have found myself in that situation too. I have found myself in a situation where I want every person to like me, And it's not even liking me because of who I truly am. It's liking me, I just want them to like me. So I do. I mean, if someone wants me to do this, I'd do it. If someone wants me to behave a certain way, I'd behave a certain way just so that I can feel loved. And I remember we even talked about this when we were talking about burnout, where we were talking about how one of the many reasons that people get burned out is because they do not know how to say no. You always want to please everybody. You always want to look out for everybody. And yet no one is looking out for you. Yet you yourself are not looking out for you. Living a life of abundance and living a life that is truly authentic, or rather living a life that is truly meaningful, requires of us to actually take off those masks, to actually get out of those hiding places where we are hiding ourselves, where we've just curled up, where once in a while, we peep out to see, okay, is it safe for me to come out now? I mean, how would you live a meaningful life if you're constantly living in fear? Because that is what it is. It is living in fear. It is living in fear with the hope that, with the promise that, you're protecting yourself, that, this is going to help me survive in this situation. But there's so much more that you have to offer to the world. There is so much more that the real you has to offer to the world, whether or not you are going to become unpopular. And see, we live in a space, or we live in a society, or at a time where, everyone wants to be liked. You post something on Instagram, you want thousands and thousands of people to like it. Or you do something and you want everyone to accept it. You want everyone to tell you, wow, you really do a good job. Never do we want anyone to tell us that, no, this isn't good. This isn't good. And maybe it's even from a place of wanting you to grow. And so many times when we operate from that place of fear, when we have all those many masks on, we can't really truly manifest, if you can allow me to use that word, or exhibit what God has truly put in us. Because, for us already, you're thinking, okay, this is not, if I do this, then I don't think people will like it. Or if I actually choose to be unpopular in this particular way, then I don't think people are going to like it. People are going to like me. But remember, like I said, people always like to say this all the time, that you're living for the audience of one. Well, I like to challenge you. If you're saying that you're living for the audience of one, are you really living for the audience of one? And do we really understand what that means? Do we really believe that we have not been put on this planet or on this earth on our own accord? That we have been put on this earth for a certain purpose, to serve a certain purpose. And what then does that mean for us? What would it mean for us to actually embrace that purpose, to embrace the person, the people that God has created us to be, and just take off all the masks that we have on? Because everyone out here is faking it. Everyone. Almost, actually, yeah. The world, we've been so used to faking it. Everyone is so used to faking it that there's actually, as Tori Kelly would put it, no time to be real. Absolutely no time to be real. We're always being told, fake it till you make it. No one wants to be real. No one wants to be real. And I remember something that a friend of mine said is that the reason even I have masks on is because no one wants to be real with me. So why would I be real with people who do not want to be real with me? Let's all put on our masks then, right? Let's all have this masquerade show, this masquerade party, where each and every one of us has our masks on. No one gets to see who we truly are. But why would you hide such an amazing gift from the world? Because you, as an individual, the real you is a gift. The real Bye is an amazing gift to all of humanity. Because I was not put here, I was not created for nothing. There is a value, there is a gift that I have to offer to the world. So why would I want to cover that up? Why would I want to hide and live in fear, live in survival mode? None of us was created to survive. We have been created to live a life that is absolutely fulfilling, amazing, and to live it all in awe of this God who, just decided that I love this world so much that I have to give it this person. That the gift that this person would bring, and I know I even mentioned this in a previous episode where I was talking about how sometimes, we have been put in this earth so that people can love God through us, And isn't that an amazing gift? Why would we want to hide that from the world? Why would we want to deny the world such an amazing gift, amazing experience that comes with being our true selves? And even as I'm saying this to you, I'm saying those same words to me myself. Because like I said, I have been in spaces where I have had to hide under a facade, under a certain role, under a certain pretense that, this is how, or this is who Bye is. When I know for a fact that that is not who I am. Where I've had to, hide my true identity because it is easier for me to pretend to be something that I'm not. It is safer for me to hide under this facade, under this mask. And what does that say about us as individuals? Is it that we do not trust ourselves, or is it that we do not trust the people who are around us? Is it that we haven't created a space or a community where we can actually feel safe to take off our masks? Oftentimes, I'm in groups, or rather I'm with my friends, and of course someone wants to share something and they're not sure if they should share it. And then, of course, there's this thing where someone random would say, it's a safe space. You can share with us. Sometimes, of course, people usually say that as, so randomly, so that sometimes they could be saying that because it is a safe space. But sometimes someone could just be saying that, out of malicious intentions, because they actually just want you to say what it is you want to say so that maybe they can use it against you, unfortunately. But sometimes I'm always just asking myself, do we really understand what that means? Or when we're saying that this is a safe space, is it really a safe space? Have we really created a safe space for ourselves to thrive as our real selves? Because let's face it, you might be thriving wearing a mask, but how do you feel about yourself? Sometimes there are days when, let's say, I've just been putting on a facade the whole day. I just get to the house and I am so exhausted because that is not who I am. I have been putting an act all day. I remember there's a day I just got home and I was in bed and I was just staring at the ceiling, I think for about 30 minutes. It was quiet and I just lay there and just thought. I can't even remember what I was thinking about, but I have never felt so much at peace. Because you might be unpopular, I don't know. You might be unpopular by being your true self. But there's an inner peace, there's an inner rest There's a rest that I don't think there's a rest like that. A rest in knowing that you do not have to hide from anything, from anyone. A rest in knowing that you're owning who you truly are, who God created you to be. There's a rest in knowing that you don't always constantly have to look over your shoulder to know if, maybe someone has found out that, what I said the other day was a lie, or how I behaved the other day that I was just pretending. So many times it's easy for us to, point fingers at others and say, or just be there saying, I don't like pretentious people. I do not like people who are constantly pretending to be something they are not. Well, I don't know if this is the perfect example, the perfect Bible verse to give in such a situation. But when the Bible talks about, removing the log in your own eye before you can, point at the speck in the other person's eye, I mean, that would be a perfect place to start. When we are constantly saying that we do not like people who are pretentious, have we looked within ourselves and, seen whether or not we have been pretentious as well? And have we taken the time to understand, why is this person being pretentious? Not that we're excusing their behavior. Not that we're excusing, someone pretending to be something they are not. But do we seek to truly understand why we have chosen to take on a certain path and not the path that we have actually been called to take? Yeah? So why are we truly hiding ourselves? Why are we choosing to feel safe under the several layers of masks that we have on? Is it because we have experienced rejection? Is it because, already, like my friend would say, no one else is being real? Why should I be real? Is that the reason? What are we so afraid of? And what would it mean for us to exist outside that fear? That is what I'm challenging you, and of course myself as well, to think about, even as we begin and step into this new month of June. And of course, go ahead and let me know, what do you think? Do you think that it is safe for us to just keep living in survival mode, keep living under the several layers of masks that we have put upon ourselves? And what would it mean for you? What would it mean for you to actually step out of that fear zone, step out of that survival mode, as I'd like to call it? Let me know. I have left a question and a poll on the same for those of you who are listening on Spotify. And of course, just reach out to me on our social media pages. That is on Instagram at @theabundantself_podcast, on Twitter at The Abundant Self Podcast, Facebook, The Abundant Self Podcast. And of course, just share this episode with a friend. Share this episode with whomever you know would need, or rather needs to have this conversation, needs to hear this conversation. Here at the Abundant Self Podcast, like I always like to say, we exist to inspire you to become the best version of yourself, the absolute best version of yourself. And trust me, the best version of yourself is the version that does not have any masks on. It doesn't matter how unpopular that version of you may be. It's the version God has called you to become. It's the version God has created you to become. Yeah, so be sure to share this episode with your friends. Of course, do not forget to check out our social media pages. And of course, the Abundant Self Podcast is available on all major listening platforms. It's actually available on everywhere you get your podcasts except on YouTube. That is something that we are currently working on. But of course, we would love to hear from you from whatever channel that you're listening in from, whether it's on Anchor, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Google Podcasts, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, on Castbox, Teacher. Let me know what you think about today's episode. And of course, do not forget to also go back and listen to the previous episodes that we have had. I mean, it has been such a fulfilling year so far. Here in the podcast, we have had great, enlightening, and edifying conversations. And let me just tell you, this past week, a friend of mine reached out and just mentioned to me how they had promised to listen to the podcast, but then I hope they actually listen to this podcast. And a big shout out to them, of course. Then they were saying that, they had promised that they're going to listen to the podcast, but then they didn't. But then now they made a commitment to be listening to the podcast every morning. And I remember sharing it on my social media and saying that sometimes I could be unsure. I could be, a bit doubtful about what I do here on the podcast. But every time I get to hear from you, every time I get to hear what you think about the podcast, and every time even you speak about the things that you want us to talk about, like today's conversation, for example, it reminds me of the why I decided to start this podcast. So yeah, that is pretty much it for today's episode. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in until this far. And of course, I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, bye-bye.